Perfect. Thank you very much, Marty, and thank you for everyone who's participating today. My name is Michael Wootton. I'm the CEO and co-founder of NF2 Therapeutics. I have also founded a company called Inflection Therapeutics. Both companies, along with Mark D'Souza, who presented earlier today, as well as Scott Plotkin, who is the head of neuro-oncology at Mass General Hospital and is the head of the Neurofibromatosis Center at Mass General. Formerly, I consulted to large pharma for 15 years, worked for a broad array of clients, Bayer, Wyeth, Roche, Abbott, Genzyme, Centers for Disease Control, and others before getting involved in investing and new company formation. And so very excited to have the opportunity to speak to you today. NF2 Therapeutics is a dedicated company focused on the development of therapies for neurofibromatosis 2-related schwannomatosis, which is a devastating disease that involves the formation of tumors on nerve cells, and specifically the auditory nerves, as well as the lining of the brain and spinal cord. The two key programs within NF2 are an antibody drug conjugate, which is a targeted tumor killing therapy focused on meningiomas, so the tumors on the lining of the brain and spinal cord, and then a gene replacement therapy for meningiomas, as well as the vestibular tumors in NF2. We've had significant grant funding. The Children's Tumor Foundation are the largest non-governmental grant writing body historically within neurofibromatosis. They've given us $500,000 towards development of our gene therapy program. We have a very deep team of advisors, strong relationships with key opinion leaders, and we have some strong IP in both of those programs and very strong preclinical data in the gene therapy and the antibody drug conjugate programs. So the founders, I introduced myself. You've seen Mark D'Souza. Many of you, Mark has successfully founded and exited several early stage biotech companies. And Scott is not only a professor at the Harvard Medical School, but has led many of the most prominent trials in the field, including Avastin, which is a drug that is widely used off-label to delay growth of tumors in neurofibromatosis. But Scott realizes it's not a cure. It is a chemotherapy with significant side effects. And so there is a very strong need for a safe and effective therapy for patients with NF2-related schwannomatosis. So this slide shows where some of those tumors occur. If you look at the top left image there, you'll see two white masses sort of in the center of the image. Those are masses of tumors along the auditory nerve. They will grow and eventually patients will lose hearing and balance. Left untreated, you can see in the bottom image how large they can get, and the structure immediately below those is the brainstem. So left untreated, they will crush the brainstem, and that will be fatal. So the standard of care is to monitor those tumors very closely. When they're growing too quickly or they get to a size that is too large, surgery will be performed. It's an open craniotomy, so a window in the skull is opened. Those tumors are removed, and the patient is left without hearing or balance on the operated side. The auditory nerve is adjacent to the facial nerve, so often the facial nerve is also compromised, and patients will lose animation in one side of their face, which socially has devastating consequences in addition to losing hearing and balance. Typical onset is early 20s. Patients will present with hearing loss. They will be assessed, and after imaging, they'll pick up these hallmark bilateral clusters of tumors and be diagnosed with NF2 by late 20s to early 30s. Typically, they've had at least one side operated, and sort of late 30s, perhaps early 40s, they will have the second side operated. Outcomes for these patients are relatively quite poor from a hearing perspective because they are what's considered late deafened. And when you're late deafened, even if you are a candidate for a cochlear implant, or if there's nothing left of the auditory nerve, auditory brainstem implant, the outcomes in terms of being able to recognize words and speech are poor. Young children that receive a cochlear implant are much more neuroplastic. They're more able to adapt to the technology to make use of the signals that are received by the brain. For older patients, outcomes are typically not as favorable. And chemotherapy is really only a tool that can be used to delay the growth of those tumors. There are significant side effects, and they are not a cure, and they do not prevent you from eventually needing surgery to remove the tumors. The second most common tumor type in NF2 are meningiomas. 80+% of NF2 patients will develop meningiomas. The top left image there, you can see several meningiomas. Those are on the lining of the brain. They are benign, so they don't have high potential for malignant transformation, but they're occupying volume that would otherwise be occupied by healthy brain tissue. And so you can imagine there are significant permanent morbidities and even mortality that can result from those tumors. And as bad as the vestibular schwannomas are, and the loss of balance and hearing, facial paralysis, et cetera, it's the meningiomas that have a significantly higher burden of permanent morbidity and mortality. And there are no FDA-approved therapies for NF2. And radiation, which is used to treat other tumor types, is contraindicated. That's because the protein that's deficient in NF2 is called Merlin, and it is a tumor suppressor protein. And it's both copies of the gene have to be deficient to result in tumor formation. If you use radiation, the potential of knocking out the second copy in these patients is significant. And so radiation is contraindicated. So we have significantly de-risked both of these programs. They are both orphan eligible, and for many of you who will know what orphan eligible means, there are an array of benefits that make orphan diseases very investable. 7 years of exclusivity post-approval is one of those benefits. Often an accelerated regulatory pathway, other tax benefits, et cetera, to really induce people to invest in orphan diseases. Both of these tumor types are not central nervous system. So we don't have to cross the hurdle of getting across the blood-brain barrier, which is a key development hurdle for many neurological indications. And we've adopted a low-risk development strategy in both indications. So in our gene replacement therapy, we have very strong in vitro data in a schwannoma cell model. We've demonstrated that our gene therapy inhibits the formation of tumors. In a mouse model where the NF2 gene has been knocked out, we have demonstrated inhibition of tumor formation in the most prominent mouse model in the field, in the lab of Dr. Marco Giovannini, who developed that mouse model. And then in healthy monkeys, we've developed or demonstrated safety in terms of the tox profile and we've demonstrated that we can reach the tissues of interest, and we see expression of the healthy trans protein in those cells, and we have very attractive intellectual property. In the antibody drug conjugate program, what we're doing is we are targeting a protein on the surface of these tumor cells that is overexpressed, which allows us to selectively target the tumor cells. And we're doing that using an antibody. So we have developed an array of antibodies that are highly selective for that surface protein. And we have developed a number of candidate antibody drug conjugates. And then in a cellular assay where we have cells that express these surface proteins, we have seen very exquisite cell killing in those cell lines. And so in the order that you would need to take into the clinic. And again, we have very attractive intellectual property. So from a competitive perspective, we are the only organization developing an antibody drug conjugate for NF2. With respect to gene therapy, there are two groups. The other group is Acuos, who've been acquired by Lilly, and they have a very different strategy. Theirs is an anti-VEGF strategy, which is really attempting to strangle the blood vessels that feed those tumors. Our strategy is to restore the protein. So the natural protein is essentially what is being expressed by our gene therapy construct. In terms of other strategies, bacteriotherapy has been attempted but fizzled out. Small molecule, sort of conventional strategies really have not been successful. And then finally, chemotherapy is used off-label. It's not a cure. It comes with significant side effects and really only serves to delay the formation of these tumors. There are 15,000 patients with neurofibromatosis 2 related schwannomatosis across the US and Europe. In addition to that, there are between 20 and 30,000 sporadic meningiomas that are diagnosed each year in the US. And 80% of those share the target, this same surface protein that we're targeting with our antibody drug conjugate. So a significant percentage of those would be candidates for a safe and effective antibody drug conjugate for sporadic meningiomas. And then finally, there are many other cancers and other tumor types that involve the loss of the same NF2 gene. And so there are additional indications that would be candidates for a safe and effective therapy for neurofibromatosis 2. We have a very lean business structure. We have partnered with leading academic centers, leading clinical research organizations, contract manufacturers. So we've been able to really access best-in-class capabilities with a cost-effective structure and really have the ability to get to the clinic very quickly. Looking at sort of price comparators for gene therapy, the range of price for approved gene therapies is $850,000 to $3.5 million per treatment, which provides a 1.4 to 4.6 billion peak sales opportunity for a safe and effective therapy in gene replacement therapy for NF2, and that is only the NF2 market. On the antibody drug conjugate, the comparable therapies, 94,000 to 168,000 per therapy, and a peak sales opportunity of 1.7 to 6.4 billion for a safe and effective antibody drug conjugate for meningiomas and both NF2 related and sporadic meningiomas. Both programs have a very clear pathway to the clinic. Both the gene therapy and antibody drug conjugate program have the potential to be in the clinic within 3 years, and a clear, well-established regulatory and approval pathway for both. As I mentioned, we have a very deep team of advisors, many of whom we've used in Inflection. I mentioned Inflection, that was also founded by Mark D'Souza, Scott Plotkin, and myself. In Inflection, we have a clinical asset. At the end of 2023, we read out from our phase 2b clinical trial, and we met our clinical endpoints. So we're tremendously excited about that, and looking forward to repeating that success within NF2.
There's a little bit more than 5 minutes left.
Great. So I'll open it up to questions in a second, but just as a high level, we are the only group developing an antibody drug conjugate for NF2-related schwannomatosis. We're one of two who are developing a gene therapy with a very differentiated strategy, and one that we have significantly validated both in vitro and in vivo. We've received significant validation, have very strong intellectual property, and we have a seasoned team who are doing it again. And we are looking to raise $5 million seed round to take both programs through de-risking and prepare to enter IND-enabling toxicology. So those toxicology studies that would be necessary to initiate a human clinical trial. Yeah, that's a very good question. So a little over half of NF2-related schwannomatosis patients are sporadic. And so they didn't inherit it. It just, at conception occurred. And so those patients would be more likely to pick it up, as you say, early 20s. The other, a little less than half, will have inherited it, and so may be aware earlier in the development of the disease that they have NF2. Specifically, to answer your question, both therapies could be effective as a treatment and as a prophylaxis. So both drive regression in existing tumors and prevent formation of new tumors. Right. Yep. Excellent question. So in the context of gene therapy, what you would be looking to do if it was treating a patient with existing tumors and existing hearing loss is you would be looking to preserve the hearing that they have, and prevent those tumors from growing further so that they don't have to have surgery to remove the tumors and lose hearing and balance in each side. And that is sort of analogous to the way that they attempt to use bevacizumab, but with a very substantial tox profile, and not successfully, given the mechanism of action of bevacizumab. From a trial perspective, initially you would be treating adult patients with established tumors. Over time, in successive trials, you would be looking to move down in age and to treat patients in a more preventative mode. And the reality is that it's easier to fund and run a clinical trial where you have a very sort of discrete endpoint where you're looking to demonstrate volumetric reduction and measurable improvement in hearing. Over time, what you would look to do is have follow-on trials that demonstrate prevention.
Is such a thing as injecting something into the tumor, kill it? in this concept?
So great question. Currently, there are no therapies for vestibular schwannomas or meningiomas where it's intratumoral injection. Meningiomas, you would have to literally go through the skull to get to the tumor. Not to say that that wouldn't stop you if you thought you had a reasonable chance of success. But there are no therapies of that type currently to treat a meningioma today. Again, similar to the vestibular schwannomas, it's open craniotomy. And then once you've opened a window in the skull, you're going to take that tumor out. The issue is that there are typically significant permanent morbidities that result from surgery. And so patients, even Dr. Plotkin has patients who may have one or two surgeries to remove a meningioma, and they tap out. They're not willing to have further surgeries.
So peak sales, is that the market size right now?
Peak sales would be the sort of annualized sales at the peak of that. So there's going to be a ramp up, and then eventually a ramp down the other side. But that is the sort of maximum year of sales, which is a key yardstick that the industry uses to measure the value of a drug in development.
Got it. So you don't have like a market size right now, the existing market, existing treatments. You don't have a chart of that at this point? Or?
So because there are no FDA approved therapies for NF2, it's difficult to sort of say, here is the NF2 drug market. You could attempt to back into off-label use of bevacizumab, et cetera. But what patients are having today is a lot of surgery or dealing with the side effects, which is an extremely low quality of life, shortened life expectancy, and many other permanent morbidities and mortality.
Great. Well, fantastic. Very important. Thanks so much.
Thank you.